leverage the community colleges around the country. We, in fact, with our dealers, have a partnership with about 12 of them and a great curriculum to develop skilled service mechanics to do field service work. And these skills are transferable to other industries, but we've developed this program specifically with the community colleges, and just a terrific working rapport with them. And it's been going on for several years. Now we have 4 new plants being built in the United States, and every one of those cities has community colleges partnering with us on the training that we need for the people coming into those facilities. So I couldn't be more positive about this program. Our business has gotten a little better, so let me give you just some quick feedback on that. I told you early in the year I thought our exports this year would be up about 65%. I raised that estimate a bit. It's maybe going to be considerably better than that. We're seeing a very sharp V recovery in most of the developing market theater of the world economy, to where global mining, global oil and gas industries are back at all-time record levels. We have hired, and mostly driven by exports, about 4,000 people directly in the U.S. already this year, and they'll be adding to that over the next few months as our schedules are continuing to ramp up. And our suppliers have probably added on the order of 4 times that number. And most of those are small and mid-sized companies. So when the GEs and Caterpillars of the world win in the global market, all employers participate in that, in our communities. So it's getting a little better. Having said that, I'm going to come back to this unemployment thing too, and I'm sort of the transitional speaker for the group. We have a very serious cyclical unemployment level that's very concerning, and a lot of people who've been unemployed for an extended period of time. I want to come back to infrastructure. I know it sounds self-serving since we worked with that industry, but we've got in the skilled trades and building construction in general, because of this very sharp downturn in housing, the unemployment rates are over 20%. So there are a lot of skilled people ready to go to work that don't have an opportunity. There's clearly a lack of demand in this area. And I think we have a deficit in terms of investment in this country in the infrastructure we need to help us compete in the world market in the future. So doing more of this on an emergency basis with the extreme unemployment levels that we have, I think will help our economy and better position it to compete in the world market a decade or 2 ahead. And the welfare of our citizenry is really a function of our ability to compete in global markets. And we need to be really consciously thinking about that now. We need a different kind of recovery this time. It can't be retail driven so much as it's got to be investment and really global competitiveness, export oriented, to give us the kind of sustainable recovery we're looking for. So let's, I know you've made some proposals on infrastructure. Anything we can do to help you move those things forward, we'd be delighted.
Rich, I know that obviously you're hearing some of this, what Jim said from your own membership. Folks in the trades right now who were doing well when the housing market was booming have been devastated over the last couple of years. And so I'm assuming that ideas like infrastructure are ones that would garner strong support from your members.
In construction, we have about 40 to 42% of our members on the bench right now. But I want to thank you, Mr. President, for first bringing us together to talk about jobs and the urgent need for more investment in workforce training. As Annie indicated a little earlier, the labor movement is a leader in workforce training, spending more than $1.5 billion a year from unions and joint programs to train people as diverse as hospital workers, electricians, hotel chefs, machinists, and master mason pilots. But as Jim said, with 15 million people unemployed, we're worried that the people that we get the training to aren't going to have the jobs. Now, we know you're committed to creating good jobs in this country. You've done everything possible, but there's a few things that stand in our way. So I'd like to make three or four points along those lines. First of all, we do applaud your efforts for job creation through the $50 billion infrastructure investment of building roads and rails and runways and providing aid to small business. all of those are going to make us more competitive as a nation ultimately, and they're also going to put us back to work. But as Jim said, we have an aggregate demand problem in this country. So I'd like to make 3 quick points. One, because of the state and local government cutback, the recovery is starting to flag. Now, your leadership was critical in securing $26 million in FMAP funding for states struggling to maintain services, but they continue to face severe challenges. In 2009 and 2010, local and state governments have cut back 11% on services. And the 2011 spending level is projected to be 7.6% below the 2008 levels. So we've seen 242,000 state and local workers laid off since August of 2008. Those cutbacks are dragging down the economic recovery, and they offset your efforts to stimulate demand through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. The second point I'd make very briefly is the need to address structural changes, primarily currency manipulation, if we're going to succeed in restoring good middle-class jobs. And we appreciate what your administration is doing and the increasing focus that you're putting on this thing. China's the main culprit, but there are several other Asian countries that are following suit. Our estimate is that the yuan is about 40% undervalued, and it grows over time, and that the Chinese government's systematic intervention in currency markets is a blatant violation of its obligations. So we think quick action along those lines could have a fast payoff in terms of stimulating American jobs, exports, and manufacturing. And the last point is we think we need to rebalance our economy in order to succeed globally. Because if the United States is going to be a high-wage, high-performance, export-led economy, it needs to do 3 things that the other successful, wealthy, industrialized exporting countries have done. First, invest much more in education and lifelong training, which is what we're recommending that you do today. Second, continue to invest in modern infrastructure, as Jim Owens has discussed earlier, including transportation, communications, and clean energy for the 21st century. And the third is to support labor law reforms that will allow workers the freedom to choose a union without fear of reprisal. Because in a cutting-edge economy, unions are an essential partner for fast-paced, innovative business. And successful high-wage export economies around the world have empowered workers, not treated them like costs to be cut. So, Mr. President, we really applaud you for all the efforts you've made to first save the economy and then turn it around and start to create jobs and build a foundation where the economy can grow and the jobs that we need can be created. And all of us look forward to working with you in that endeavor.
Thank you. All my economic team, Tim, Larry, now Austin, as the head of the CEA, my cabinet secretaries at Commerce and Education, Labor. We spend a big chunk of each week, and have for the last 2 years, trying to optimize the nation's economic performance and the recovery in light of a couple of things that have already been mentioned. Obviously, the severity of the downturn. Historically, financial crises bring about recessions that are deeper and longer lasting than the normal business cycle recessions. There is a sense on the part of consumers that that they have to start saving more and cutting back on their debt levels, and that means that the prospect of a consumer-driven V-shaped recovery is less likely. And we're in a fiscal environment in which we were already in debt, which means that some of the traditional tools that we have are more difficult to apply. We essentially have to apply the accelerator and the brakes at the same time. But two things that I think might be worth focusing on in the remainder of our time would be, one, the issue that's already been raised, the issue of aggregate demand. Are there ways that in a cost-effective fashion we can boost aggregate demand? And the second thing we should talk about is uncertainty, because one of the things that we do here, obviously this has been prominent in the business press, is the notion that, well, companies are now making a profit again, they're sitting on a lot of cash, but they're unwilling to put that cash to work investing because they're concerned about uncertainty, whether it's legislative, healthcare, financial regulatory reform, or taxes and the outlook there. So I'd be interested in hearing some thoughts from the group on both those items. Martin, I will start with you and see if there are some strategies for boosting aggregate demand that would garner your support, knowing that you are obviously concerned about our long-term fiscal outlook.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Yes, you're right. I am very concerned about the size of the out-year fiscal deficits. And I would emphasize that the size of the aggregate demand problem is massive. We're talking about a GDP shortfall of about $1 trillion, annual rate of $1 trillion. That's the size of the gap between the GDP today and what it would be if we were operating at full employment. And that's why we have about a 10% unemployment rate. So what can be done? Well, I think one thing, I have thoughts about three things. First, fixing the housing markets, the residential housing markets. With the end of the first-time homebuyer credit, I think we're beginning to see house prices coming down again. I think that's likely to accumulate more falls in house prices. That'll cut consumer spending, and it makes it harder for people to move from where they are to where the jobs are. The administration's policies, as you know, have focused on helping people who are having a hard time meeting their monthly payments, on mortgage modifications that cut the monthly payments, but they don't deal with the major problem of individuals who are underwater in their mortgages, who owe more on their mortgages than the house is worth. And that's about 30% of all of the people who have mortgages. They owe more, and the average ratio of their debt to the value of their home is about 130%. So it's not surprising that we're seeing increasing volumes of foreclosures and defaults, and that can only get worse if house prices fall. So I think an expanded, aggressive strategy to deal with principal modification is really necessary. The second thing is helping businesses get loans so they can expand their hiring and expand their businesses, helping small businesses in particular. And the key there, as I see it, is that local banks are cutting back on their willingness to lend because of their expected losses on commercial real estate. Congress recently passed your plan to use $30 billion of TARP money to inject capital. It remains to be seen how much the small banks are going to be willing to take up some of those funds, but I think more can be done. In particular, what I think could be done is to allow the small banks that sell impaired loans to the public-private investment partnership or to others to amortize the resulting losses of capital over several years, say 5 years, so that if they sell off an impaired loan that cuts their capital, instead of being forced to cut back on their lending, they would have a period of time over which to do it. And the third thing deals with the tax rates. As you know, I think that the current tax rates should be continued for 2 years for everybody, but with no legislative commitment after that. I think the 2-year extension would help to keep demand alive at a time when the economy is weak, and the notion that it would not continue after that would take some $2 trillion off the size of the national debt